basically very, very briefly, in that case, you had a card game case where you had these very standard stock characters that was ripped off by a Chinese company, which reskinned all of the art, but left the gameplay and the rules 100% the same. So not really a good foundation for finding selection and arrangement in a case like this. You have to go all the way back, I think, to Metcalf in the Ninth Circuit, which very briefly was about the show City of Angels. And when you compared these two works, the issue was nothing by itself was substantially similar, but you had extremely similar a setup for the show. They were both sort of hospitals in poor areas. The main character was a black muscular surgeon, and just had general sort of similarities, but not enough to by itself be substantially similar. The casts and the scenarios were the same. So in that case, the Ninth Circuit said the selection and arrangement of those elements was enough to be copyright infringement. The caveat there is that one of the big issues in that case was access. And so the alleged infringer or the guilty infringer admitted during deposition or other parts of discovery that he had read and reviewed the City of Angels, I don't know if it was a screenplay or teleplay or whatever you call it, multiple times, made lots of references to it. And so it smelled bad, to use a non-legal term of art. And that issue of access was a big problem. But in this case, if we got into discovery, I'm pretty sure access is going to be something easy to show. You can tell that when NetEase or whoever developed it for NetEase was making this game, they had PUBG out and they were side by side sort of copying every single element right down to the rural aqueduct. And interesting to know what you guys think, but for me, things like including the rural aqueduct really just put it over the line for me. Of course, I work for a video game publisher, so I don't like to see stuff like this. I think on the other hand, the argument is, well, we need to have freedom of different game publishers and developers to compete and make their own games in the genre, and you want to make sure that you enable new entrants to the genre. And so where exactly that line should be drawn is that's the question.
You just answered your own question. They have the right to make their own game, not to copy yours. You didn't. I was sitting. I'm not a game player, so I like don't know what you're talking about. But as before you got to the aqueduct that you were so locked on, it's like, how could this not be a dead bang winner? That was a ripoff, clear ripoff. So what?
Well, I think it's hard.
What's the argument on the other side?
So one thing I think that should be mentioned is that if you've never seen, let's say you've never seen a movie before, you're from 1820, you time travel in the future, and you're here today, and you're shown two vampire movies, and they're really nothing alike, but they're two vampire movies, and these are the only two movies. It's the first time you've ever heard of vampires, first time you've ever seen a movie. Two, they'd be identically like, oh my God, the second vampire movie ripped off the first one. Even though us looking at them, we think they're totally very, very dissimilar, clearly not copied. Someone who's never seen a vampire movie or doesn't know anything about vampires or movies would think they're identical and would think one's a copy of the other. So if you're not into video games, I think the same thing happens. You don't play video games, and now you see two video games which are dissimilar and have a lot of things that are not similar and weren't copied, but because you're not in the video games, you look at it and you think they're the same. And I'm not saying that is applicable here, but it is something to be wary of.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting analogy. And we have seen, speaking of vampires, we have seen a lot more cases filed like this. So you actually had some involvement, I think, in this Wizards of the Coast case that they filed against Cryptozoic for a allegedly infringing card game called Hex. And it was the same sort of theory where you had, card types like vampires and zombies and angels, and the allegation was, well, you just copied all of our stuff. And the question was, well, yeah, you don't own zombies. You don't own, angels who can fly and have, characteristics which naturally flow from an angel, or if I'm a vampire from, sucking blood or whatever. But I guess the question is, in a genre case like this, at what point does something become part of the genre? If we get 5 more games that have rural aqueducts, and all of a sudden you can't make a battle royale game without a rural aqueduct. Has that now become necessary to the genre in the way that frying pan butt armor has? I know it sounds ridiculous, but there's all these games now which have it, and so if I include it, it seems like that should be okay.
Well, the perhaps the clearer case is the card game case where although we actually end up maybe we don't agree on that. Our office takes the position that something like a card game that is created that can be played by anybody, that includes by the producer of another film, and it's not copyright infringement, even though the creator of the film created this card game. It's once you're done, it's like the Harry Potter game,
Quidditch.
Quidditch. Anybody can play Quidditch, and you can advertise it's a Quidditch game. And in fact, over at UCLA, they do just that, and they have teams, and it's okay because this was a game, admittedly created in a copyrighted work, admittedly tremendously original, but it's a game anybody can play. Let them play it. There's no prohibition against that.
Yeah,
Well,
And I can tell by your smile you're not agreeing.
No, I used to represent the U.S. Quidditch Association, so I actually agree entirely. I had a discussion with Warner Brothers over how they felt about that. They registered the mark Quidditch, and then we had this interesting question where I was representing the U.S. Quidditch Association, which then became the International Quidditch Association, and then came back to the U.S. Quidditch Association. They wanted to call it Quidditch. There's this trademark registration which covered everything from broomsticks to lingerie, and so we had to figure out, what are we able to do with a game which was created in a fictional work, and those were some fun questions.
You must have been dealing with Dale Nelson over there, who's now a partner in our law firm.
Oh, there you go. Small world.
Yeah, just a month ago.
I didn't realize you were such a big deal, Dan. But do you want to briefly discuss the Pinkerton case, or would you rather talk about loot boxes first? You've got about 10 minutes.
I think the loot box is more interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me give 1 minute. I'll super quickly on Pinkerton, because Steven's right. Loot box is more interesting. Just 1 minute on this, because I think it's an important case to watch. Red Dead Redemption 2, very popular game, sold $775 million in the first 3 days. Pretty good for a video game. It's got this, you can see the image, there's some cut scenes, some video in the game that involve Pinkerton agents, and they're depicted very poorly because historically the Pinkerton agency was not always the most savory group of people. And they sent a demand letter. This is the demand letter to Take-Two or Rockstar. I can't remember which of the subs they sent it to. So basically, you owe us some money for using our trademark in the game, and we don't like how you depicted our agents. Fun fact, I also used to work at Pinkerton as a security guard, so I feel very strongly about this case. If you look at the complaint, I think you can see some of these historical photos. Did this one have Abraham Lincoln? Oh yeah, this is like, the Pinkerton agents standing next to Abraham Lincoln. They played an actual pretty important role in history at various points. And so the use of them in the game is going to be completely protected by the First Amendment. Rockstar Games and Take-Two, its parent company, filed a deck relief action in December based on this demand letter they received. I think it's an open shut case, not really worth talking about, but I do want to highlight it because, again, game developers and publishers have to be careful about what they put in the game. And where's that line with the First Amendment? It's just a case to watch.
I think it also shows that if you have a plaintiff, if you have a client with an IP and you decide to write a demand letter to certain video game companies, be very careful because there are video game companies out there that will DJ you. And Take-Two, Rockstar is one of them. They're extremely, they're litigious. They're not afraid to fight. They don't like to settle. And if you think you have a claim that's like, it's not that great, you won't litigate it, but you'll write a letter. Sometimes you have those claims. You'll write a letter. Don't to certain people. Like you should probably do not do that to Take-Two or Rockstar because they'll DJ you and then you're stuck in a litigation that your client does not want to be in.
Yeah. So on loot boxes, as Steven mentioned, it's a very important issue in the video game industry, and it's treated differently all over the world. You have all sorts of legislative action going on right now to try to regulate it.